Welcome to Unit Design 101, where we break down the overall factors that make units useful in Fire Emblem and beyond. Whether you're a ROM hack creator or merely interested in overall design, this resource is for you. This week we explore the Cavalier, the most well-rounded and flexible base class in Fire Emblem, and see why it works so well. The Cavalier's stat line is average across the board, with no stat particularly high or low by default, leaving any major variation to the individual unit's personal stats. Fighters are stronger and have more HP, Myrmidons are faster and more skilled, armors have more defense, and Pegasi and mages have more resistance than Cavaliers. That said, the Cavalier stats give a perfect lesson on the importance of benchmarks. With their decent speed, they double many other foes and only get doubled by Myrmidons and sometimes mercenaries. With their decent strength, they still deal good enough damage to everything except for armors. With their decent skill, they generally don't struggle to hit in the same way fighters do. So while they aren't the best in any field, they're good enough in every field to do all but the most specialized of tasks. On top of having stats that are just good enough most of the time, the Cavalier has three advantages over other base classes: their weapons, their movement, and their mount. For weapons, Cavaliers are the only base class in most Fire Emblem games that can use two weapon types, traditionally swords and lances. Pretty much every other base class gets limited to a single weapon type the vast majority of the time. This doubles down on their trademark flexibility, letting them pick a better weapon for their assigned job to make up for any weaknesses they have. A more accurate sword for better hit and avoid, a more powerful lance for higher damage, a javelin for 1 to 2 range. Cavaliers have all of these options in a base class. The early game also tends to be when the weapon triangle matters the most, so always being able to get a fairly significant hit, avoid, and damage advantage, or at least never suffer a penalty, makes all of their matchups better. Their movement is the second and often more discussed advantage above other base classes. As discussed in the Armor Knight video, mobility is great for its raw movement, but arguably even more important for the flexibility of placement that mobility provides. If a 6-move unit and a 4-move unit were in the exact same place and wanted to attack an enemy 4 tiles away, the 4-move unit can attack it from 1 or 2 tiles depending on orientation, while the 6-move unit can attack from 3 or 4 tiles, and that's just including melee range. And in a situation where you have several units trying to attack a small group of enemies, particularly in the early game where you can't reliably one round, having units that can move farther lets more of your army attack in the same turn. Yet another example of Cavaliers providing flexibility. This is all without saying how raw mobility lets a unit travel farther to reach more distant objectives faster without using tools like warp or dance, which, even in games where they do exist, are generally not available in the early game. Need to rescue a village, chase down a thief, kill a retreating enemy, rush to block a fort, hold a forward choke for a turn, or snipe a key target? Mobility is your best friend at letting you get to any of these locations in a timely manner. The final benefit Cavaliers have over other base classes is their mount. This one is more of a mixed bag, as being on a horse gives them worse movement penalties than other units on rough terrain, and makes them vulnerable to cavalry effective damage, but mounts, at least in some Fire Emblem games, can provide two significant advantages: Canto and generally better aid calculation. Aid is only applicable in games with rescue, and tends to be on the more complicated side, but to put it briefly, mounted units can usually rescue units with a much higher constitution than unmounted units can with the same constitution. Exceptions do exist, but this is the general trend. And speaking of rescue, Canto lets mounted units use the rest of their movement after taking certain actions. While moving after attacking is limited to the Jogjal and Tellius games, moving after trading, rescuing, dropping, shopping, or the like exists in the GBA games as well. This means that even if they aren't seeing combat directly, mounted Cavaliers can still benefit your army by ferrying other units around, trading weapons, shopping, and doing all of those non-combat tasks that an army needs to fight at peak efficiency. If there is one word that I've come back to again and again in this video, it is flexibility. If nothing else, even if other units are stronger, faster, bulkier, or have more specific niche use cases, the standard Cavalier has been largely unchanged from the beginning because versatility and flexibility will always be important. Can this framework still create bad units? Well, at the very least it can create underwhelming ones. Alec and Noash in Genealogy of the Holy War often struggle because their combat is poor, and without trading and rescuing, their non-combat utility is almost non-existent. That said, they still often get rated above units with on-paper better combat in tier lists because their high mobility lets them at least participate in combat more than many of their infantry peers. Mystery of the Emblem and Thracia 776 tried a different tactic and forced mounted units to dismount, limiting them to swords and reducing their mobility and stats to be below that of dedicated infantry. This meant that mounted units were better outside, but infantry were preferable indoors, as every advantage the Cavalier would have had was taken away inside. They were still usable, and if sufficiently leveled were still better than untrained infantry, but it was a rather harsh punishment. You can also do what Radiant Dawn did, and double down on movement penalties to literally stop cavalry in their tracks. Horses can't jump up and down ledges, can't move through swamps, and have -2 movement on most indoor maps because, while they didn't want to create a dismounted class type, they did still want to imply that horses can't come indoors. Even with the ability to move after attacking, Cavaliers were so limited by the map design that they rarely got a chance to show all they could do. So, what's the bottom line on Cavaliers? Flexibility. Unless your Cavaliers are far weaker in combat, or severely limited by map design, or every enemy uses a Horse Slayer, the raw flexibility of the Cavalier class, on account of its solid stat block, high mobility, and notable dual weapon access on a base class, make them always reasonable units to deploy. Thank you so much for watching. Leave a comment and share the video if you enjoyed. A huge shout out to Royal Legu's Guard member Sal Mellon, and Legu's Guard members C2 Peekly, Enigmatic Mr. L, The Big Herman 007, Bro Duderman, NKO Rico, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, and Lakag for directly supporting the channel. Join the Discord to discuss topics like this, and for more info when videos are coming out. And until next time, this is Mithril Zenith, signing out.